Have you ever had that quiet feeling that something sacred was about to begin, but you almost missed it? Not because it wasn't real, but because you weren't watching. This is that moment, and it comes only once a year. The month of May is not just a tradition, it is a divine appointment, and Padre Pio revealed that what you do today, this very day, can determine the graces you receive for the rest of the month. But if you miss it, you may not recover it later. May is not just a month marked by flowers, warmth, or the turning of a calendar page. In the spiritual realm, May is a holy threshold. Padre Pio understood this with clarity and reverence. For him, it was not superstition or sentimental devotion. It was a season of supernatural openness. He taught that May, more than any other time of the year, was chosen by heaven to pour out unique graces through the hands of the Virgin Mary. It was not accidental, it was appointed, and those who recognized it could receive blessings that seemed otherwise unreachable. But those who ignored it often walked past unopened doors of grace, unaware of what they missed. Throughout church history, the month of May has been dedicated to the Mother of God. From ancient Marian hymns sung in candle-lit processions to daily flower offerings by children in rural chapels, the faithful have always sensed something different in this season. Saints across the centuries felt it too. St. Louis de Montfort described May as a mystical corridor in which Mary walks closest to her children. St. Maximilian Kolbe called it the time of the Queen's shadow, a month when her mantle stretches across every household that calls upon her. And Padre Pio, carrying both the wounds of Christ and a heart fiercely loyal to the Mother of Christ, knew that this month was a battleground and a banquet all at once. He believed that from the first day of May, heaven watches with intense attention. The actions of the soul on this day carry spiritual weight. A simple prayer, an act of devotion, a candle lit with faith. All these gestures are not symbolic. They are real transactions in the spiritual realm. And the 1st of May, he said, is a gate that either swings open to blessing or stays closed if left untouched. The soul that begins May asleep may find the rest of the month heavy, directionless, or dry. But the soul that wakes up, that responds with even the smallest act of intention, finds a flow of grace moving through its life like never before. Why? May, because heaven is not indifferent to time. Just as there are physical seasons of planting and harvesting, there are spiritual seasons when the soil is more fertile. May is such a season. In this month, the Virgin is especially present, not in abstract theology, but in actual intervention. She walks invisibly through homes, she guards doorways, she listens more closely. But there is one condition. She does not force her way in. She must be invited. And most never invite her. Not because they reject her, but because they forget. They forget what this month truly is. Padre Pio warned that the enemy does not want souls to recognize May, because he knows what happens when someone begins this month with Mary. He knows that prayers are multiplied, that conversions begin, that households are protected, that impossible things become possible. And so the devil's tactic is simple. Distraction. Make people busy. Make them say tomorrow. Make them cynical. Because if he can steal May, first, he can weaken the soul for the rest of the month. This is why today matters, not tomorrow, not the 2nd week of May, but now, this very beginning. The soul that honors Mary today lays the foundation for 31 days of spiritual breakthrough. The soul that delays may never catch up to the grace that was meant to be poured. Padre Pio used to say, when May begins with Mary, it ends in miracles. But the opposite is also true. When May begins in silence, in spiritual apathy, it often ends in missed opportunities and weakened protection. The faithful often wonder why their prayers go unanswered, why the weight they carry doesn't lift. And sometimes the answer is not in how much they pray, but in when they respond to grace. There are windows in time, and May is one of them. A window that opens wide at the start and slowly narrows. To enter it, one must act. One must say yes. One must decide that today is not ordinary, because spiritually it isn't. Heaven is leaning low in this season. The Queen of Heaven is walking gently through the shadows, searching for candles lit. In her honor, listening for voices that call upon her name. The soul that understands this does not hesitate. It opens its door. It prepares its heart. It invites the Mother of God not just into a shrine, but into the home, into the family, into the secret corners of the soul. And from that moment, everything begins to shift. May is not just a month, it is a gift. But like every gift from heaven, it must be unwrapped. And the ribbon is waiting to be pulled by your own hands. Padre Pio saw this gift clearly, and now he pleads through his legacy. Do not let this day pass like any other. Recognize the hour, respond to the invitation. Begin May with Mary, and heaven will meet you in ways you cannot yet imagine. The first act is deceptively simple. To the world, it may appear like nothing more than a quiet tradition, a religious gesture performed by the overly devout or sentimental. But to heaven, and to Padre Pio, lighting a candle on the first day of May is far more than a symbol. It is a declaration of faith, a spiritual signal, and a profound invitation. It is the beginning of something sacred. Not because the flame itself holds power, but because what it represents moves the unseen world. The lighting of a candle before an image of the Virgin Mary is a spiritual key. And when done with intention and reverence, it opens a door. Padre Pio understood the language of heaven was not only spoken in words, but also in actions. He taught that even the smallest visible act, when offered with pure intention, creates invisible ripples that reach the throne of God. The candle is one of those acts. It is a flame that communicates to heaven, to the angels, and yes, even to the enemy, that this house is not spiritually dormant. It is awake, it is claiming light, it is expecting visitation. The white candle represents purity, clarity, hope. It is not just wax and wick. When lit with faith, it becomes a witness. It becomes a flame that prays even when your lips fall silent. Padre Pio believed this so deeply that he urged his spiritual children to light a candle every May 1st without delay. He said that the flame of that first candle in May becomes a guardian light throughout the rest of the month. It sets a tone, consecrates a space, and opens a path. When you light a candle before Mary's image on this day, you are not decorating your home. You are establishing a sanctuary. You are claiming that your house belongs to heaven. You are placing a spiritual beacon in your living space that welcomes grace and repels darkness. Because the light is not neutral. It sends a message into the spiritual atmosphere that this is a dwelling where the Queen of Heaven is not only honored, but invited. In the ancient Christian tradition, light was always a sign of life, of vigilance, of divine presence. In the catacombs, in the monasteries, in the hearts of saints, the candle was never trivial. It was a weapon, a defense, a song of hope, and when lit in honor of Mary, it becomes a prayer without words. Padre Pio believed that the soul may struggle to articulate its longings, its fears, its pleas, but the candle speaks for it. It burns on its behalf. It reminds heaven that there is faith burning here, even in silence. But not just any candle. It must be lit with intention. It must be placed with respect. It must not be rushed. The act matters. The attention given to it matters. Because the spiritual realm responds not to the size of the gesture, but to the sincerity behind it. And so Padre Pio taught his followers to pause before lighting the flame, to pray inwardly, to speak quietly, even if only in the heart. Mary, I welcome you here. This is your house too. Dwell with us this month. Protect us. Guide us. Once lit, the candle should be left to burn, even as life continues around it. Its light becomes a presence, a reminder, a silent intercessor. It stands even when you cannot kneel. It glows even when your mind grows weary. Padre Pio used to say that faith needs anchors, tangible signs that remind the soul what it believes. The candle is one such anchor, and when it is lit on the first day of May, it becomes a spiritual threshold. And what of the spiritual opposition? What of the darkness that creeps in unnoticed? Padre Pio warned that the enemy fears light, not physical light, but spiritual light. He said that demons flee from homes where Mary is honored, especially when the household shows visible signs of devotion. The candle, then, becomes not just a sign of welcome to Mary, but a warning to every spirit of confusion, heaviness, and division. It says, "You are not welcome here. This place belongs to the Mother of God." Throughout his life, Padre Pio saw the impact of this simple act. He heard the testimonies. He watched souls awaken. He saw homes transformed, not by loud miracles, but by quiet faithfulness. The lighting of the candle was the first crack in many walls of despair. It was the first step in many journeys of reconciliation. It was the opening gesture in countless spiritual renewals. Not because the flame had power in itself, but because it reflected a soul saying yes to heaven. That is why this act must not be delayed. May 1st is not just a good day, it is an appointed day, a gate that opens and then slowly closes. The soul that lights its candle on this day joins a rhythm of grace, a divine pattern that stretches through history. It aligns with the footsteps of Mary, who walks gently through the world this month, searching for homes that call her by name. To light the candle is to say, "Here we are, we remember, we welcome you." And in that simple gesture, the Queen of Heaven draws near. Grace begins to move, and a house, no matter how dark its past or present, begins to glow with the first light of May. The second act is not just an act of devotion, it is a decision, a declaration, and a doorway. To consecrate oneself to Mary at the beginning of May is to place your heart, your home, and your future into the hands of the Queen of Heaven. Padre Pio believed that this one act, when done with sincerity and humility, could change the entire trajectory of a soul's spiritual life. It is not a complicated ritual. It does not require eloquent words or dramatic gestures. What it requires is the willingness to kneel, to speak from the heart, and to mean every word. Consecration means to set something apart for God. It is the spiritual act of giving oneself fully and without reservation into the care and mission of heaven. When that consecration is made to Mary, it becomes even more intimate, even more tender, because it is given to the Mother who bore God Himself in her womb. Padre Pio taught that Mary's role is not symbolic or distant. It is active, maternal, and deeply personal. She is not merely honored in May, she is present. And to consecrate yourself to her on the first day of this sacred month is to say, "I recognize your role and I welcome your guidance." The act begins with the body. Padre Pio insisted that it be done on the knees, not out of superstition, but because posture matters. When the knees bend, the heart follows. When the soul kneels physically, it often softens spiritually. And this act of kneeling is a posture of dependence, an admission that we do not want to live this month or this life alone, that we want her presence, her prayers, her protection. The words of consecration are simple, but they must be spoken slowly, deliberately, and with intent. Padre Pio taught that prayer is not measured by volume or length, but by truth. A single sentence, whispered with a pure heart, can open more spiritual doors than pages of rushed petitions. That is why he favored prayers that were short but full of faith. In the act of consecration, one must say with clarity, "Mary, I give myself to you. I trust you with my home, my loved ones, my battles. Walk with me. Intercede for me. Guard the doors of my heart and the rooms of my soul. This is not poetry. It is a contract, a spiritual agreement in which Mary becomes not just a figure of devotion, but a daily companion. And because God honors free will, Mary never imposes herself. She waits to be invited. She waits for that sincere act of the heart that says, I choose you. And once she is chosen, she acts. Not always with visible signs, but always with real spiritual impact. Padre Pio often said that the devil trembles at a soul that belongs to Mary, not because that soul is perfect, but because it is protected. He saw that consecrated souls were harder to tempt, slower to fall, and quicker to rise when they did stumble. Mary's mantle, once stretched over a home, becomes a shield against despair, confusion, and spiritual attack. The act of consecration is not magic, but it is powerful. It does not erase suffering, but it sanctifies it. It does not remove all obstacles, but it invites heaven into the middle of them. On the first day of May, this act takes on special meaning. It is the foundation for 31 days of grace. It is the anchor that holds the soul steady as blessings begin to pour. Without it, the month may pass like any other, but with it, May becomes a spiritual season unlike any other. The consecration seals the invitation that the candle initiated. It says not only come, but stay, not only visit, but dwell, and it must not be rushed. Even if it takes only a few minutes, it should be a sacred moment. Padre Pio encouraged his spiritual children to turn off distractions, to find a quiet place, to speak slowly and from the heart, and after the words are spoken, to remain in silence, because silence after prayer is not emptiness. It is space for God to respond. It is space for Mary to enter. This silence is often when grace begins to move. It may not be dramatic. It may be a simple feeling of peace, a clarity of thought, a softening of the heart. But that silence is not nothing. It is the beginning of something new. Padre Pio said that Mary always answers those who give her permission to act. And the consecration is that permission. This act is for everyone. It is not only for the deeply devout, the spiritually mature, or the religious. It is for the weary mother, the struggling father, the anxious student, the wounded believer. It is for the soul who has tried everything else and finally decides to give Mary a place. And once that door is opened, she enters with grace that the soul did not know it needed. The second act may seem small, but it echoes through eternity. It tells heaven that this soul is not content to drift, that this heart has made a choice. And heaven always responds to choices made in faith. On the first day of May, that choice is especially powerful, because this is the day the Queen begins her journey through the world, and the soul that meets her at the threshold with a kneeling heart will not be forgotten. The third act is the boldest. It is the one that requires the most faith and the most honesty. It is the moment where the soul stops asking only for what feels reasonable and begins to ask for what feels impossible. Padre Pio taught that May was not the month for small prayers. It was the month for daring ones, the ones you've been afraid to voice, the ones that seem too broken, too delayed, too far gone. He believed that Mary, during this time, is especially attentive to the cries that rise from a place of desperation and trust. The third act is simple. Make your impossible request. Heaven does not tremble at your needs. It does not flinch at your sorrow or your unanswered prayers, but it does wait for your faith. Not perfect faith, not heroic faith, but simple, childlike confidence that dares to ask for something only God could do. Padre Pio urged the faithful not to filter their petitions through the limits of logic. He warned that too often people reduce their prayers to what they believe is likely or polite. But grace does not operate by human probability. It operates by divine mercy, and mercy is drawn to the bold. The request must be real, not vague, not shallow, something personal, specific, a healing, a reconciliation, a conversion, a financial breakthrough, a child, a home, an answer, a miracle. And once spoken, it must be surrendered, not controlled, not worried over, but given. And it must be sealed with this line, as Padre Pio taught: "Mary, if you grant me this, it will be for the glory of your Son, Jesus." This line transforms the request from self-interest to sacred petition. It aligns your desire with heaven's will. The request must also be made with reverence. Padre Pio encouraged his spiritual children to speak it aloud, perhaps even on their knees, because the body helps the soul to focus, and because kneeling reminds the heart of who it is speaking to. The Mother of God is not a wish-granter. She is a queen, and to speak to her with faith is to be heard. But what if the request feels too big? That is exactly the point. The bigger it is, the more room God has to show his glory. Padre Pio believed that when you ask for the impossible and it is granted, not only is your life changed, but your faith becomes a witness to others. And if the answer is delayed or comes in a different form, the very act of asking still opens the soul to grace. The courage to ask enlarges the soul's capacity to receive. The key is sincerity. This is not a mechanical process. The candle was an invitation. The consecration was a surrender. But this final act is a leap. It is the moment where the soul dares to say, "I believe you can, and I believe you will, if it glorifies Jesus." Padre Pio said that the Virgin delights in bringing to her Son the bold requests of her children. Just as she interceded at Cana, turning water into wine, she still intercedes today. But she waits for the ask. This is why the third act cannot be skipped. It is not optional, it is not selfish, it is sacred. Because in asking, the soul admits its limits and acknowledges God's limitless power. The miracle may not come in the way expected. It may not come when expected. But something always changes when this act is done with a full heart. In this final act, heaven is watching, the Queen is listening, and the soul, in its poverty, finally speaks the words that unlock the floodgates of grace. Padre Pio knew this moment well. He saw it in the lives of countless people. And he saw it in his own life, a life marked by impossibilities made possible by Mary's quiet, powerful intercession. This is not the time for hesitation. It is the time for courage. Ask. Ask with hope. Ask with confidence. And above all, ask with love. Because when the impossible meets heaven's mercy, miracles are never far behind. The month of May opens like a spiritual gate, wide and radiant. But not every soul walks through it, not because grace is scarce, and not because heaven is silent, but because the enemy is not. Padre Pio warned that while May is the month of extraordinary grace, it is also a battlefield. The light that descends from heaven does not go unchallenged. The enemy hates May with a specific hatred, precisely because it belongs to Mary. And where Mary is welcomed, he is defeated. That is why his strategy is precise. He does not need to frighten souls or tempt them into open rebellion. He only needs to distract, delay, and cool the flame of devotion before it has a chance to burn. His first tactic is distraction. It begins subtly. The schedule fills up, the phone buzzes, fatigue sets in, the soul forgets, not with hostility, but with passive neglect. Padre Pio said that the devil often works not with fire, but with fog. He clouds the soul's awareness. He turns what should be sacred into something ordinary. He makes the beginning of May feel like just another day. The enemy knows that if a soul misses the start, it may drift through the rest without momentum. And so he plants noise in the mind, tension in the schedule, restlessness in the heart. The soul feels rushed, unfocused, distracted, and the candle remains unlit. The second tactic is doubt. The soul begins to question the value of the actions. How could lighting a candle matter? How could kneeling for a short prayer really change anything? The mind begins to intellectualize what the heart already knows. Padre Pio warned that doubt, masked as rational thought, can disarm even a devout soul. It's not always open disbelief, it's the subtle erosion of confidence. The soul does not reject the idea of Mary's presence, but it withholds full trust. It hesitates, and in that hesitation the grace weakens. The third tactic is delay. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll pray later. I'll begin next week. The soul believes it is still saying yes, but it is always a yes postponed. And in the spiritual realm, delayed obedience is often disobedience in disguise. Padre Pio said the enemy rarely says, "Don't pray." He says, "Not yet." But heaven works in appointed times. May 1st is not arbitrary, it is chosen. The window begins now, and every moment of delay is a moment lost. The enemy knows this, he thrives on it. He does not need the soul to say no, only to say not today. The final tactic is discouragement. If a soul does begin, lights the candle, prays the consecration, makes the request, it may expect immediate change. When nothing visible happens, the enemy whispers, "It didn't work. You didn't do it right. You're not holy enough." He sows disappointment to choke the faith that just began to grow. Padre Pio reminded souls that grace is not always felt. It is often hidden. It works in silence beneath the surface. The enemy wants the soul to judge spiritual actions by emotional results, but Mary does not operate on spectacle. She works through quiet fidelity. These tactics, distraction, doubt, delay, discouragement, form a subtle but powerful net. And many souls fall into it without noticing. They do not reject the invitation of May. They simply never truly answer it. They remain at the threshold, caught between intentions and inaction. Padre Pio saw this often. He saw the glow of potential, dimmed by passivity. He saw souls surrounded by grace, but spiritually asleep. And he wept, not with anger, but with sorrow, because the door had been opened from heaven's side. But the handle was never turned from earth's. The enemy knows he cannot stand where Mary is welcomed. That is why he fights the beginning so fiercely. He wants the flame never to be lit, the prayer never to be spoken, the impossible request never to be made. Because once those acts occur, he loses ground. The house becomes guarded, the soul becomes occupied. The queen enters, and where she walks, the serpent retreats. This is why the strategy must be named. It must be exposed. The soul must be vigilant, not paranoid but aware, not afraid but alert, because the war is real, and the enemy is clever, but he is also defeated when the soul acts in faith. Padre Pio urged souls to resist not with aggression, but with simplicity. Do what heaven asks, light the candle, say the prayer, ask boldly, do not wait, do not overthink. Do not let the enemy win by stealing your beginning. Victory in May does not belong to the strongest or the most eloquent. It belongs to the faithful, to the ones who respond, to the ones who act while others hesitate. The enemy's strategy is subtle, but so is grace. And grace, once welcomed, always prevails. Across the years, those who took the call of May seriously and followed the simple acts revealed by Padre Pio began to witness changes that defied reason. These were not always loud miracles, but deep shifts. Healing where there was despair, reconciliation where there was silence, light where there had been only confusion. One woman had been praying for her daughter's healing for months. Medical reports offered little hope. On May 1st, she lit the candle, prayed the consecration on her knees, and made the impossible request. She had no great expectation, only a quiet trust. Within days, her daughter's condition changed dramatically. The doctors could not explain it, but the woman did. She said Mary entered her home. Another testimony came from a man estranged from his son for nearly 10 years. Pride and past wounds had silenced every attempt at reconciliation. That May, he followed Padre Pio's guidance faithfully. He asked for the impossible, a restored relationship. Weeks passed and nothing happened until a message appeared unexpectedly on his phone. His son had reached out. Their first conversation was hesitant but sincere, and by the end of that month the walls had begun to fall. He called it a resurrection of the family. These stories are not rare. From around the world, letters, emails, and whispered testimonies echo the same pattern. Small, sincere acts met with undeniable grace. One woman reported a breakthrough in her finances after years of struggle. Another found peace in the middle of a crushing season of grief. A young man finally broke free from years of addiction. All of them began with 3 simple acts. None of them expected instant results, but all of them encountered a shift that could only be called divine. Padre Pio often said that when Mary is invited with sincerity, she never forgets. These testimonies are not emotional stories meant to inspire. They are echoes of a truth that has held for generations. The Queen of Heaven responds when her children act in faith. And when they give her even a little space, she fills it with the presence of her Son. Grace does not require perfection. It only asks for permission. These souls gave it, and heaven answered. As the sun sets on the first day of May, something unseen begins to shift. Heaven has extended its hand, but only those who reach back will feel its touch. Padre Pio understood this urgency. He knew that grace moves most freely when the soul responds without delay. The window is still open, but it will not remain open forever. Those who light the candle, say the prayer, and ask the impossible are not simply performing rituals. They are placing themselves in alignment with the will of heaven. They are showing heaven that they are willing to be transformed. Now the choice is before every soul. The invitation has been made. The instructions are clear. Nothing complicated. Nothing requiring status or special knowledge. Just 3 acts of trust. 3 acts of love. 3 keys that unlock blessings far beyond human reach. But they must be done. Not only understood, not admired. Done. Because grace does not land where there is no action, and Mary does not enter where she is not invited. This is the moment to decide. To say yes, to act while others hesitate, to open the door while it is still day. There is no guarantee that the soul will feel anything. That is not the point. The point is faith. Faith that does not rely on signs. Faith that walks forward before it sees the road. And for the soul that steps out now, that moves while grace is near, the month of May will not pass unnoticed. It will become the beginning of something new. The Queen of Heaven is walking. She is close. Her hands are full of grace, and she is ready to enter, but only if the soul says, "Come." This is the time, this is the hour, and what the soul chooses now will echo far beyond the walls of May. Let it be a yes. Let it be today.